Crazy stories of fraud and terrible neighbors today, starting with try to extort, harass, and ruin me. I'll make sure you're rightfully convicted of disability fraud. Posted by Lord Smaldemort. I lived in an illegal rental in a place that you'd call a landlord's market. There was a housing shortage, and although I had a great job, no credit problems, no background issues, it was impossible to rent somewhere affordable because of my dog. I eventually found a great place, but it came with a nutty landlord. She lived on the property. I'm not a choosing beggar, however, so I take it. For 12 months, I endure the landlord's violation of my rights, taking deposits that she should not have, micromanaging my personal life and my guest, and it's pretty awful. She's always high on painkillers with tiny pin needle pupils, telling me weird crap and trapping me in conversation that I'd rather not hear. Faced with homelessness, I take the trampling of my rights and privacy. She made me miserable. After a year, I had enough. She crossed the line when she had my boyfriend removed by the police when I was at work one day. He had been staying for under 48 hours. I was gone for 2 weeks at home and had arrived back to my rental 48 hours before this. No one was in my rental while I was gone. On top of tossing my boyfriend out, she delivered a bill for his rent and utilities for staying the past 2 weeks that I was gone. No one was in my house. She already bullied me. I guess she thought she could extort me. She created fake court paperwork to intimidate me. The bills I received from her are insane. They are not the writings of a lucid human. She gets all sorts of details wrong and makes personal statements that are inappropriate. The place was empty and I was gone, but she wrote a bill and insisted I pay for his tenancy. This is when crap hit the fan. I finally stand my ground. Extortion is the limit. Everything is falsified. I think it was the Vicodin talking and making her brave. As an aside, that will be super relevant later. Her employer had an open fraud case against her. She told me early in my tenancy because she dared them to come after her. Perhaps she should have not dared so hard. After the fake tenancy debacle, crap gets real. I take off work to read up on my rights and to protect my dog and my stuff, and she starts harassing me. Specifically, she did these things over the course of a few days. She called from a blocked number and asked for a stripper and call girl. She called my work as a new landlord seeking a reference and told them I was partying, which is why I wasn't at work, and then came into my yard at 11 at night, stomped up on my porch to scare me, then walked out of the yard, claiming it was a free country when asked what the heck she was doing. She called the Humane Society and told them I had a vicious dog on the loose who attacked her dog. She even called the police and sent them to my job, I work with kids, claiming she found drugs in my house. Needless to say, I was pretty freaked out by all of these things. I got a TRO against her, and she couldn't keep trying to ruin my career and get my dog euthanized and attempt to intimidate me. It was good for 3 years. I was happy I won in court. It was a great move for my safety and empowerment. However, when I did move, about 10 days after her extortion, she falsified documents, kept my deposit, and I was forced to go back to court to get my money. Again, I won, and although it took a lot of time and energy, eventually it was garnished from her account. I not only got out of my lease, rightfully, but took my deposit money back against her will. I had a restraining order for 3 years, and she did not know my new address. I was thrilled. The torment she put me through was unbelievable. So, let's cut to the revenge. Remember that fraud case that she boasted about? Well, it came back to bite her. Landlord boldly did construction, high as a kite on Vicodin, while collecting disability because she was wheelchair bound. See the issue here? She played the system to get into paid early retirement, ate pills all day, increased her property value by building up her space, and collected money from illegal rentals. 4 months before I moved out, she was doing construction, and I had a strange feeling I should document her fraud. I knew she could turn on me at any point, and well, I'm sure glad I had the foresight to do so. She had gone to work the first day of her contract and fallen out of a wheelchair on a ramp that was not up to code. Almost 4 weeks later, to the day, she was happily at home, continuing with her activities, building a tool shed from scratch. She was doing construction with no wheelchair. Duh. She was bold and figured that she could never get caught. She was doing all sorts of physical activity. I decided to film her and made sure the date was noted. I also took pictures. Some part of me just knew that I should document what I was seeing because she was an awful human who was leeching off the system. She worked in education and she couldn't be fired. Her position was tenured and she was holding her spot while on medical leave for over 4 years. They legally could not hire a new teacher. Substitutes poured in and out of her classroom. Hundreds of children missed out on a legitimate education because she held her spot. She was scum. I worked in a similar field, so I knew what damage she was doing with her actions. Back to the eviction and TRO event. Shortly after moving out, when the restraining order was in effect, I went to her employer and offered evidence in his fraud case. It was a serious state-led fraud case against her. They were going after her. He was elated that I had such strong evidence, and he put me in touch with private investigators. I handed over the evidence after sitting down with them and giving my statement of her activity and of how she was mobile at home. I didn't have to exaggerate and I didn't have to lie. I just told them exactly what happened. Even if she didn't burn me, I felt like I was doing my civic duty by ensuring the kids had a real teacher in their classroom instead of this piece of garbage. Months later, I called the investigators and found out that my evidence was what really sealed the deal. She was convicted of disability fraud. She was fired from her position and was potentially going to pay back years' worth of disability payments. I did that. I am the reason her scam fell apart. She thought she could bully me into extortion. She didn't. She thought she could ruin my career and hurt my dog when I stood up to her. She didn't. In fact, I won. It was what I needed to be empowered after she had crapped on me. It wasn't even revenge as much as standing up for myself. If she did have to pay it back, she'd only have her house to pay with. My dream is that she lost her house, ended up with a renter, and just hopes for a kind landlord. I mean, this is huge because this lady was not just treating OP badly, but had a whole system of fraud underneath it all. And also not just making money from the disability, not actually being wheelchair bound, which is a complete slap in the face to everyone else, but also staying on as a teacher at a position where they could not fire her, they could not hire a new teacher, and so the children suffered for that with their education. I mean, I wish that there was some loophole around that they could have got rid of her, but it sounds like OP had enough. And you know what? These people think that they can do all these plans and get away with them because nobody found them out yet. I'll just take advantage. Nobody is going to actually stand up against me. I'll just scare these people. And then finally, OP has the guts to stand up, lay it all out, and take her whole scam and idea completely down. Way to go, OP. What do you think? My neighbor cut my trees, posted by Regular Kahuna with concluded updates. Now, I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice, but this story has a crazy twist at the end you won't expect. About a month after I moved into my new house, my neighbor cut half a dozen old growth trees, 12 to 23 inch in diameter, in a cold weather climate near the property line. I had a survey done, $800, and discovered that all the trees cut were on my property. The owner of the house is a real estate agent married to a private contractor, so I suspect they knew what they were doing and were trying to take advantage of my ignorance. I have their email address from the HOA, and I'm wondering if I should write a demand letter and send it certified mail, email and ask what's going on, or hire a lawyer. State laws in New Hampshire suggest that I'm entitled to 3 times the value of the trees, but I don't even know how to value the trees. I wouldn't have cut them, and now I have to look at my neighbor's house instead of the trees. Please help. Update 1. I met with a lawyer and gave him my version of events along with estimates from my arborist and the plot from my surveyor. The value of the timber makes the theft a felony in this state, and since the trees were within 55 feet of a protected shoreland, they will likely have to pay a hefty administrative fine to the state for not getting the proper permits before cutting the trees. We know they didn't get the permit because it would have required a survey and shown that trees they had wanted to cut were on my property. The lawyer is familiar with the lady of the house from her real estate dealings, mostly closing and title works, and said she's a pain in the butt and that she doesn't like to admit fault. It's gonna be a long slog. Update 2. It's been a month and we finally gotten a detailed drawing of landmarks from the surveyor to confirm that the surveyor got the lines plotted correctly, comprehensive estimates from a landscaper based on photos provided by the previous owner of the house, and timber values from an arborist. Now that everything is squared away in that regard, we're getting ready to submit a demand letter. The one question my lawyer asked is if I should include a value in the demand letter or if I should invite them to contact my lawyer for further details. What would be the pros and cons of each approach? Final update. Today, they settled with me for $35,000 after legal fees. Bonus update. Neighbor may be poisoning my dog. A few years ago, I won a $35,000 claim against my neighbor when they cut several of my trees down. Since then, they sent hate email, thrown garbage on my lawn, and yelled obscenities at me when I'm in my yard. One email said they'd call the cops if my dog barks, among other really mean things, but I don't have anything else I can show the police. I've just ignored them, except for 2 incidents when I asked her not to throw treats over my 4-foot fence. She just told me to move. She's still very angry nearly 4 years later. Today, I had to take my dog to the vet with ethylene glycol poisoning. I have a fenced side yard that borders my neighbor's yard where we let the dog out to do her business. In the past, usually on weekends, she vomits and we chalked it up to dietary indiscretion, but I bought automotive ethylene glycol test strips on suggestion of a friend. Today, her vomit tested positive for ethylene glycol, so I rushed her to the vet who confirmed she'd ingested antifreeze. They're treating her to the tune of $3,000. While waiting at the vet's office, I ordered a camera to mount in the yard and a basket muzzle to keep her from eating anything in my yard. I don't know what else to do that might connect the dots between the treats I've seen them throw in my yard in the past and the antifreeze poisoning my dog is suffering with today. Do I have any legal recourse? Updates in the comments from OP in response to a comment about the camera. I had a camera there, but it covers my yard, not what the neighbors are doing. I could see where she, or my dog, was messing around reviewing the footage while I was waiting at the vet's office, but my partner couldn't find anything there. I also don't think that would have caught anything small chucked over the fence, like the treats that I'd seen them throwing before. My dog will be at the vet's office until Tuesday. The meds have to be administered on regular intervals until the poison is out of her system. The house feels very empty right now. In response to a comment telling them to contact the police. Thanks, I made the report this evening. I just have to send them the medical report when the vet releases my doggo. The poster sharing this says, although the part with the dog is somewhat unresolved, it's been a year and the major conflict, the trees, is resolved, so I'm marking this as concluded. This just sounds like straight up, hey, I'm going to do what I want and get away with it because I have some power and I have some standing. You know what? Just because you're a high up person, you might have some wealth and power. You can't just do what you want like this. You can't go cutting trees down for your neighbors. I mean, do you think that they're just going to take it lying down and not fight back? These are their old trees. This is on their property. It's their stuff. Like I said before, I ain't a lawyer. This is not legal advice, but it is easy to see, too, that I'd be upset if I was a neighbor and my trees were cut down. And you know what? They won $35,000 in court after the legal fees. So much so that the neighbor gets salty and starts poisoning their dog. Now, there is no general proof of that exactly, but we all know what happened here, right? I mean, if you were OP, what would you do if you found your dog had ingested antifreeze from neighbors likely throwing treats over and doing this? OP, I am sorry you had to go through this. What do you think should happen next? Watching my neighbors enjoy their backyard when they won't allow us to enjoy ours. Posted by Luna Sosike. With an update. We have retired neighbors who were friendly when we moved in. It started with a quick wave over the fence. It has now escalated to every time they hear any of us in the backyard, they rush out and stand at their fence until we have to pass them again. Now there's only one way in and out of our yard, to listen to them talk. We'll often say bye and walk away and they're still talking. They'll often say, oh, all right, bye, as we close the door behind us to return inside. I always dreamed of having a big backyard, and I'm so frustrated that now we don't use it. At one point, one of the neighbors broke their leg. This isn't stopping her. Her husband came over, engaged us in conversation to stall us so his wife could come over too. She was hobbling along and complaining that she was in such pain as she leaned on the fence. Now, before you think they're lonely, they're not. I see their children and grandchildren over often. The breaking point was we bought a new pressure washer and wanted to test it out in the backyard. We were out there with our daughter and she was oohing and eyeing. It was a cute family moment. Of course, the neighbors took their spot on the fence and started just yelling to speak over the pressure washer. It was crazy to watch. The only person that goes into our yard now is the lawn care guy. I go out occasionally to pick fruit, but we haven't used our yard in months. My daughter and I play out in the front as we get more privacy facing a main street than we do in the backyard. Yesterday, a friend came over and wanted to see the orange trees that we have. We were on the other side of the yard when the neighbor came out and stood on the fence as usual. Even having a guest didn't deter her. I hurried my friend back inside as the neighbors essentially talked to herself. The update. A few months ago, I made a post about my neighbors that would not let us spend time in our backyard without sucking up all of our spare time with their chatter. I know it seems excessive, but we are a time-poor family. I work 4 days a week, my husband works full-time, I study full-time, and we have a toddler. In order to make it all work, my husband and I work alternating days, so we get only a few days off altogether a month. So you can imagine how angry I was that each time we wanted to spend family time outside, my neighbor would be there, telling me about the time her baby died, how sick her sister is, how sick they have been, or some other tragedy. Anyway, I read through everyone's comments, cheers by the way, and while I can't construct a way to block their view of us, I took the rest of your advice. I starved them of attention until we weren't a viable source anymore. Each time that I went out, I would smile, nod, and then put all my headphones in and carry on with what I needed to do. Mowed the lawn, picked up dog junk, cleaned out the garden beds, played with the dog. It took about 3 months, but they got the message. I was annoyed each time that I had to go out because it felt like a chore stacked onto another chore. Now I had to go mow my lawn, but also ensure that I didn't make eye contact with the fence that I knew my neighbors were standing at, desperately trying to get my attention so they could tell me about their latest bout of gastro. I'm still not comfortable trying to go out into the backyard to spend time as a family because I'm anxious they'll harass us again. It's slow progress, but hopefully once the weather warms up, we'll be back to having backyard picnics. Now this right here, these people know that they got a reaction from OP, who clearly did not want them on the fence, telling them about whatever crazy stuff they wanted to. That is the privacy, that's what they want. I mean, OP could put up a privacy fence or something to block them, but really, they shouldn't have to do that. The whole thing about starving for attention works because the neighbors are clearly doing this just to get a rise out of OP. And if you cut off that fuel source, cut that gasoline off of that flame, the neighbors are just wasting their time. They're not getting what they want anymore in a narcissistic way, and that is truly the great way to deal with them. I wish there was a better way, and maybe I'm missing something here, but this is a crazy story, and goodness, I hope it continues to get better for you, OP, that you're on the right track. What do you think? Karen sues us, destroys my property, and her dog attacks us, so we sue back. Be sure to click the video on the screen. You don't want to miss this crazy fallout, and I will see you there.